The chipped porcelain mug warmed my hands, a familiar comfort against the chill of the morning. For 30 years, this kitchen had been the heart of our home. The place where I'd brewed countless cups of coffee for my son, Alex, packed his school lunches, and celebrated every milestone. A cold dread seeped into me, colder than the autumn air drifting through the window. I had some difficult news to share, news that I knew would shake the fragile peace we'd managed to build. Alex shuffled in, his eyes still heavy with sleep, and grunted a greeting. His wife, Sarah, trailed behind him, already scrolling through her phone, a world away. They'd been distant lately, the unspoken tension in the house thick enough to cut with a knife. I'd sensed their impatience, their thinly veiled resentment, but I'd told myself it was just stress, the pressures of their demanding careers. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "There's coffee?" Alex poured himself a cup, not meeting my gaze. Sarah barely nodded, the silence stretched, punctuated only by the clinking of mugs. It was always like this now, a stark contrast to the lively breakfasts of years past. I cleared my throat, the words catching. I have something to tell you both." Alex finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "What is it, Mom?" "I have a conference call in 15 minutes. Sarah didn't even bother to look up from her phone. Her indifference was a small sting, one of many I'd grown accustomed to. I took a deep breath. I lost my job. The effect was immediate. Alex's mug clattered back onto the counter. Sarah's thumbs froze on her screen. The air crackled with a sudden, sharp tension. Their reactions weren't of concern, not of sympathy, but of something far more calculating. "Lost your job." Alex's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "What do you mean, you lost your job?" Before I could explain the company restructuring, the downsizing that had made my position redundant after all these years of loyal service. Sarah spoke, her tone sharp and accusatory. "But that was your only income. How are you going to contribute now?" Her immediate concern wasn't for my well-being, but for the household finances. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a cold confirmation of my deepest fears. Had I become nothing more than a source of income to them? The argument escalated quickly, their voices rising with each passing second. Alex accused me of irresponsibility, of jeopardizing their financial stability. Sarah chimed in, her words laced with a condescending tone that mirrored her own privileged upbringing. They spoke of budgets and expenses, of the sacrifices they had to make, completely oblivious to the lifetime of sacrifices I had already made for them. "After everything I've done for you," I finally interjected, my voice trembling slightly. "This is how you react." Alex scoffed. "What exactly have you done, Mom? You worked a job, just like everyone else." His dismissal of my decades of tireless work, the countless overtime hours and missed holidays, was like a knife twisting in an old wound. Had he truly never understood the extent of my dedication? Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We were planning to start a family. Your job loss couldn't have come at a worse time." "Sarah's right," Alex added, his tone hardening. "We need stability, not another burden." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Burden. That's how they saw me, the woman who had poured her entire life into raising him, who had always put his needs before her own. The realization was a brutal awakening. "So, what's the plan?" Alex demanded, crossing his arms. "Are you going to start looking for another job? Because we can't support you indefinitely." Before I could even process the callousness of his question, Sarah offered a solution, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Actually, I was talking to my mother. She knows of a situation. A live-in companion for an elderly gentleman. Good pay, all expenses covered." The suggestion, so casually delivered, sent a chill down my spine. They were ready to palm me off, to ship me away to a stranger's house, just to ease their financial worries. The depth of their indifference was staggering. "And if that doesn't work out," Alex continued, his eyes already scanning his phone, "there are assisted living facilities. Some offer work-based stays. You could earn your keep." The casualness with which they discussed my future, as if I were a piece of unwanted furniture, was the final straw. A cold fury began to simmer within me, slowly eclipsing the hurt. This wasn't about financial hardship. It was about their desire to be rid of me. A cold resolve settled within me, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past hour. Their callousness had inadvertently freed me, severing the invisible ties of guilt and obligation that had bound me for so long. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw not my beloved son and his wife, but two self-centered individuals who saw me only as an obstacle to their own comfort. "I see," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "So, my usefulness has expired." Alex shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Sarah remained impassive, still engrossed in her phone. Their lack of reaction, their complete absence of empathy, only solidified my resolve. They truly didn't care. "Mom, don't be dramatic," Alex finally mumbled. "We're just being realistic." "Realistic?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Realistic is acknowledging the decades I've dedicated to this family. Realistic is showing a modicum of respect. I stood up, the weariness of years lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something other than exhaustion, a spark of defiance. "Don't worry," I continued, walking towards the hallway. "You won't have to worry about me being a burden any longer." Sarah finally looked up, a hint of suspicion in her eyes. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere," I replied, pausing at the doorway, "where my contributions are appreciated." I didn't tell them about Eleanor, my late employer, the woman who had seen my worth, who had become more of a friend than a boss. I didn't tell them about the years of quiet generosity, the unexpected inheritance that now sat securely in a trust fund. That would be my secret, my ace in the hole. Alex finally seemed to sense a shift in the atmosphere, a change in my demeanor. "Mom, wait, where are you really going?" I turned back, a small, enigmatic smile playing on my lips. "Somewhere you'll never expect." With that, I walked out, leaving them standing in the stunned silence of their own making. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, a definitive end to a chapter of my life. For a moment, I simply stood on the porch, taking in the crisp autumn air, a sense of liberation washing over me despite the ache in my heart. Years of stifled emotions, of putting everyone else first, seemed to lift with each breath. The fear of the unknown was still there, a small tremor beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a newfound sense of possibility. I walked down the driveway, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. My car, a reliable, old sedan I'd maintained meticulously over the years, sat waiting at the curb. It felt like an old friend, ready to accompany me on this unexpected journey. I got in, the familiar scent of leather and old maps a comforting presence. As I drove, aimlessly at first, my thoughts drifted to Eleanor. Her kindness, her unwavering belief in me, had been a lifeline during some of my darkest times. I remembered her gentle smile, her quiet encouragement, the way she had always made me feel valued, not just as an employee, but as a person. A wave of gratitude washed over me, a warm counterpoint to the coldness I had just experienced. Then, a thought struck me. Eleanor's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell. He had handled all her affairs, and he had my contact information. A sudden sense of purpose ignited within me. I pulled over to the side of the road, retrieved my phone from my purse, and scrolled through my contacts until I found his number. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Caldwell and Associates, this is Mr. Caldwell." "Speaking, Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice a little shaky but gaining strength with each word. "This is Margaret, Eleanor." "Eleanor worked with me for many years." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Margaret, yes, of course. I remember Eleanor spoke of you fondly. Is everything all right?" His tone held a note of genuine concern, a stark contrast to the indifference I had just faced. A small seed of hope began to sprout within me. "Actually," I continued, taking a deep breath, "I was wondering if I could schedule a time to speak with you. There are some things I need to discuss regarding Eleanor's estate." The meeting with Mr. Caldwell the following day was surreal. His elegant office, overlooking the city, felt like a world away from the cramped kitchen where my life had just imploded. He spoke in hushed tones, his words carrying the weight of significant news. He confirmed Eleanor's passing a few months prior, a fact I hadn't been aware of, lost as I was in my own routine. Then, he revealed the reason for his call: Eleanor's will. He slid a thick, bound document across the mahogany desk, the embossed seal catching the light. My heart pounded in my chest with a mixture of disbelief and nervous anticipation. "Eleanor held you in very high regard, Margaret," Mr. Caldwell said, his gaze kind. She often spoke of your loyalty and your spirit. He paused, adjusting his glasses. As such, she has named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate. The words hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. Sole beneficiary. Eleanor had family, distant cousins she occasionally mentioned. The idea that she would leave everything to me, her former housekeeper, seemed utterly impossible. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. There must be some mistake. Mr. Caldwell smiled gently. There is no mistake, Margaret. Eleanor was a woman of clear intentions. She stipulated that her estate, which includes her home, her investments, and a substantial trust fund, is to be transferred to you. He mentioned a figure, an amount so large it made my head spin. It was more money than I could have ever dreamed of, a sum that could erase decades of financial worry in an instant. The irony was staggering. My own son had deemed me a burden, ready to cast me aside, while a woman who had known me for a fraction of the time had entrusted me with a fortune. The injustice of it all threatened to overwhelm me, but beneath the shock, a flicker of something else began to glow, a sense of empowerment. Mr. Caldwell explained the legal process, the steps required to transfer the assets. He assured me of his full support and offered to handle everything discreetly. As I left his office that day, the autumn air felt different, lighter, filled with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The chipped porcelain mug suddenly seemed a relic of a past that no longer defined me. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal procedures and financial consultations. Mr. Caldwell and his team were incredibly efficient, handling everything with the utmost professionalism and discretion. With each document signed, each account transferred, the reality of my newfound wealth began to sink in. It felt surreal, like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. I moved out of the old house, the silence amplifying the absence of Alex and Sarah. The emptiness was stark, but it was no longer filled with the weight of their judgment. Instead, a sense of quiet liberation permeated the space. I stayed in a comfortable extended stay suite, giving myself time to process everything and decide on my next steps. One evening, as I was reviewing some property listings online, a familiar number flashed across my screen. Alex. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, a flicker of hope, a surge of anger, and a deep-seated wariness. I hesitated for a long moment before answering. Mom? His voice sounded strained, hesitant. Is that really you? It's me, Alex, I replied, my tone neutral. There was a long silence on the other end, heavy with unspoken words. I could almost feel his curiosity, the dawning realization that my life had moved on without him. We were worried about you, he finally said, the lie hanging heavy in the air. Worried. They had been so eager to see me gone. The hypocrisy was almost laughable, but I didn't call him out on it. Not yet. I'm fine, Alex, I said simply. I'm taking care of myself. Where are you staying? He pressed, a note of urgency creeping into his voice. Somewhere you don't need to concern yourself with. I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. The tables had turned. The burden of explanation was no longer mine to bear. Life began to take on a different hue. Without the constant pressure of managing a household on a tight budget, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I found myself with time and resources I hadn't possessed in decades. I started taking long walks in the park, rediscovering the simple pleasure of nature. I enrolled in a painting class, something I'd always dreamed of but never had the opportunity to pursue. My wardrobe began to evolve. The practical, durable clothes I'd worn for years were gradually replaced by more stylish pieces, reflecting my newfound confidence. I even indulged in small luxuries, a good bottle of wine, a beautifully scented candle, things I would have previously considered frivolous. One afternoon, I decided to visit a high-end furniture store. My old house had been furnished with hand-me-downs and budget finds. Now, I had the chance to create a space that truly reflected my taste. As I wandered through the elegant showrooms, admiring the craftsmanship and luxurious fabrics, a sense of quiet satisfaction bloomed within me. This was my time, my opportunity to build a life I had always deserved. Unbeknownst to Alex and Sarah, I had also begun the process of reclaiming the house. Mr. Caldwell assured me it would take time, but the legal wheels were in motion. The thought of them living in a house bought with my years of sacrifice, while treating me with such disdain, fueled a quiet determination. A few weeks into my new routine, I received another call from Alex. His tone was different this time, less demanding, more curious. It was clear he had noticed the change in my demeanor during our last call, and perhaps, just perhaps, a seed of doubt had been planted. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "Sarah and I were wondering, how are you really doing?" The sudden shift in their attitude, the feigned concern, didn't fool me for a second, but I played along. "I'm doing very well, Alex," I replied, my voice cheerful. "Thank you for asking. Are you? Are you seeing anyone?" he asked, the question laced with an odd mixture of awkwardness and something that sounded suspiciously like jealousy. I chuckled softly into the phone. "That's none of your business, Alex." His silence on the other end was telling. He had expected me to be alone, struggling. The thought that I might be moving on with my life, perhaps even finding companionship, clearly unsettled him. The power dynamic was subtly shifting, and he could feel it. We miss you, Mom." Sarah's voice chimed in, sounding surprisingly subdued. It was a stark contrast to her usual sharp tone, and the sudden change felt disingenuous. "Do you?" I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You have a funny way of showing it." Another silence. Then, Alex spoke again, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. "Is there anything we can do to make things right?" The sudden eagerness to mend fences, after their blatant dismissal of me just weeks ago, was almost comical. Could they sense a change in my circumstances? Were they starting to suspect that I wasn't the helpless, penniless old woman they had imagined? "Make things right," I echoed, a wry smile touching my lips. "That would require a level of and genuine remorse that I haven't witnessed." "Mom, please," Alex pleaded, his voice cracking slightly. "Can't we just talk like a family?" The word family felt hollow, a cruel mockery of the way they had treated me. "Perhaps someday," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But right now, I need some space." I ended the call, a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction swirling within me. They were starting to feel the consequences of their actions. The subtle shifts in my life were beginning to register. The weeks turned into months. The legal process of reclaiming my house moved forward steadily, albeit slowly. I focused on my newfound passions, the vibrant colors exploding on my canvases. The intricate melodies I was learning on the piano Eleanor had left behind it had been in storage. These activities filled the void that Alex and Sarah's absence had created, nurturing a sense of self I had long neglected. I started exploring the city, visiting museums, attending concerts, immersing myself in experiences I had always put off. I was building a life for myself, on my own terms, free from the expectations and judgments that had once defined me. One day, I received a letter. The return address was familiar, Alex and Sarah's. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. The letter was a carefully crafted apology, filled with flowery language and expressions of regret. They wrote about missing me, about realizing their mistakes, about wanting to rebuild our relationship. It sounded sincere, but a part of me remained skeptical. Had their change of heart been genuine, or was it motivated by something else? Tucked inside the letter was a photograph. It was a picture of them standing in front of a new car, a luxury SUV I knew they couldn't have afforded on their own. A cold suspicion snaked through me. A few days later, Alex called again. His tone was noticeably warmer, more ingratiating. "Mom, we were hoping you might want to come over for dinner sometime. We have so much to catch up on." The sudden invitation, the change in tone, the photograph of the expensive car, it all clicked into place. They weren't missing me, they were missing my potential financial support. The secret fortune was no longer a secret, at least, in their minds. "Thank you for the invitation, Alex," I replied, my voice cool and distant, "but I'm quite busy." Perhaps, in the distant future, the door to reconciliation remained slightly ajar, but the path back was going to be a long and arduous one, and entirely on my terms. The charade of their sudden affection didn't last long. Alex's calls became more frequent, his tone increasingly insistent. Sarah started sending saccharine text messages, filled with emojis and declarations of love. It was transparent, their sudden interest directly proportional to their growing suspicion about my financial situation. One afternoon, Alex showed up at my temporary apartment unannounced. His forced smile and overly enthusiastic greeting felt like a poorly acted play. Sarah trailed behind him, her eyes darting around the tastefully decorated living room. taking in the expensive artwork and the panoramic city view. "Mom, this place is nice," Alex said, his gaze lingering on a framed sculpture. "Are you doing okay?" "I'm doing wonderfully, Alex," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Thank you for asking." Sarah, meanwhile, had wandered over to the window, her expression a mixture of curiosity and envy. She ran a manicured finger along the smooth glass, her silence more telling than any words. The contrast between my current surroundings and the modest home they still occupied was palpable. "We were just wondering," Alex began, his voice carefully casual, "about your job. Did you find something new?" "I did," I replied, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "A much more rewarding endeavor." Their eyes widened, a spark of avarice igniting within them. The subtle probing had begun. "Really?" Sarah asked, her usual coolness momentarily forgotten. "What kind of job?" "A job where my contributions are truly valued," I said, my gaze direct, "and one that provides substantial compensation." The unspoken question hung heavy in the air between us. I let them stew in their curiosity for a few more weeks. Alex's calls became increasingly desperate, Sarah's texts more insistent. They even started dropping by unannounced. Their attempts at casual conversation laced with thinly veiled inquiries about my new job. One evening, they arrived just as Mr. Caldwell was leaving my apartment. The sight of the impeccably dressed lawyer shaking my hand at the door seemed to confirm their growing suspicions. Their eyes widened with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. "Mom, who was that?" Alex asked, his voice tight. "That was my attorney, Alex," I replied, calmly. "Your attorney?" Sarah echoed, her carefully constructed composure starting to crumble. "Why do you need an attorney?" "Perhaps because I have significant assets to manage," I said, my tone deliberately nonchalant. The carefully constructed facade of their indifference finally cracked. "Significant assets," Alex sputtered. "What are you talking about?" I invited them in, a sense of quiet anticipation building within me. The moment of truth was at hand. I gestured for them to sit down, my gaze steady. "Remember, Eleanor," I began, watching their faces carefully. They exchanged a quick glance, a flicker of understanding passing between them. They knew of Eleanor, the woman I had worked for so many years. They knew she had been well off, but they had never imagined the depth of her generosity. "Mr. Caldwell has been handling her estate," I continued, my voice measured, "and as her sole beneficiary." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I inherited everything." The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. Alex and Sarah stared at me, their faces frozen in disbelief. It was as if I had spoken in a foreign language, their minds unable to process the enormity of what I had just revealed. Finally, Alex broke the silence, his voice a mere croak. "Inherited everything. But how?" "Eleanor was a very generous woman," I replied calmly, meeting their stunned gazes. "She appreciated my loyalty and my spirit, as her lawyer put it." Sarah's eyes darted around the room again, lingering on the expensive artwork. A calculating look flickered across her face, the wheels in her mind visibly turning. The reality of my wealth was beginning to register, and with it, a shift in her attitude. "So, this substantial compensation you mentioned," Alex began, his tone now laced with a newfound respect, almost deference. "It's significant." I nodded slowly, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. Decades of being overlooked, of being taken for granted, were finally being acknowledged, albeit indirectly. "Significant enough," I said, my gaze unwavering, "to ensure I never have to worry about being a burden to anyone again." The weight of their past treatment hung heavy in the air. The memory of their eagerness to send me away, to palm me off onto strangers, was still fresh in my mind. The tables had well and truly turned. "Mom," Alex began, reaching out a hand towards me, his expression a mixture of shock and something that resembled remorse. I didn't take his hand. The chasm of their indifference was too wide to bridge with a few words and a belated gesture. "The inheritance also includes the house." "Alex," I said, my voice firm. "The house that was bought with my years of hard work and sacrifice." The revelation of the inheritance hung in the air, a tangible barrier between us. Alex and Sarah's initial shock was slowly giving way to a desperate attempt to reconcile. Their words were now dripping with false sweetness, their actions exaggerated, displays of concern. They offered to help me move, invited me to dinner constantly, even suggested I move back in. The sudden shift in their behavior was transparent, driven not by genuine remorse, but by the allure of my newfound wealth. The hypocrisy was almost insulting. "Mom, we were so wrong," Alex said one evening, his voice thick with forced emotion. "We want you back. This house, it's not the same without you." Sarah chimed in, her eyes wide and seemingly sincere. "Please, Mom, let us make it up to you. We can be a family again." The word family still tasted like ash in my mouth. Their actions had spoken volumes, revealing a selfishness that ran deep. "The house is no longer your concern, Alex," I replied, my voice cool and distant. "Mr. Caldwell is handling the transfer of ownership." Their faces fell. The realization that their living situation was now uncertain hit them hard. The tables had turned completely, and they were finally facing the consequences of their greed. "Transfer of ownership," Sarah stammered. "What do you mean?" I said, my gaze unwavering, "that the house will soon be mine again, and I have no intention of letting you live there." The shock on their faces was palpable, a stark contrast to the indifference they had shown me just months before. The finality in my voice seemed to sink in. The pleading and false remorse faded, replaced by a raw desperation. They bombarded me with calls and texts, their tone shifting from cajoling to accusatory. They reminded me of all the years I had lived with them, the meals I had cooked, the laundry I had done, as if those were debts I now owed them. Their entitlement was staggering. They genuinely believed that my past contributions somehow obligated me to continue supporting their lifestyle, regardless of how they had treated me. The depth of their self-absorption was breathtaking. "How can you do this to us, Mom?" Alex's voice was laced with anger during one of our strained phone calls. "We're your family. Family is a two-way street, Alex," I replied icily, "and you made it very clear where I stood in your family when I lost my job." Sarah even tried a different tactic, appealing to sentimentality. She sent old photos of Alex as a child, accompanied by tearful messages about how much they missed the old me. It was a pathetic attempt at manipulation. The woman who had scoffed at my housekeeping skills and dismissed me as an unfit caregiver was now trying to tug at my heartstrings with faded memories. The audacity was almost comical. "The old me," I replied to one of her texts, "was someone who put everyone else's needs before her own. The new me is learning to prioritize herself." Their desperation grew with each passing day. They realized that their comfortable life, subsidized by my years of labor, was about to come to an abrupt end. The secret fortune that they had, initially dismissed, was now the very thing that held the power to dismantle their carefully constructed world. The day the house officially reverted to my ownership was bittersweet. Standing in the empty living room, I could almost hear the echoes of laughter and arguments, the ghosts of a life I had tried so hard to build. But there was no sadness, only a quiet sense of closure. This chapter was finally coming to an end. Alex and Sarah arrived later that day, their faces pale and drawn. The reality of their impending eviction had clearly hit them hard. Their bravado had vanished, replaced by a desperate plea for forgiveness. "Mom, please," Alex begged, his voice hoarse. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere else." Sarah stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. "We're so sorry, Mom. We were awful. Please, give us another chance." The sight of their distress tugged at something deep within me, a mother's instinct to protect her child. But the years of their indifference, their blatant disregard for my feelings, had built a wall too high, too easily dismantled. Forgiveness would take time, a genuine change in their hearts, not just a reaction to their current predicament. "I understand you're upset," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But you need to understand the consequences of your actions. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." The weight of their regret was palpable, a stark contrast to the lightness I felt. The secret fortune had not only given me financial freedom, it had given me the strength to finally prioritize my own well-being. "What are you going to do, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm going to live my life, Sarah," I replied, a small smile gracing my lips. "A life filled with peace and on my own terms." As they stood there, defeated, a thought occurred to me. Perhaps their story, their sudden regret after years of entitlement, could resonate with others. If you've ever experienced a similar situation, where your sacrifices were taken for granted, Or, if you've had to reclaim your own worth after being undervalued, share your story in the comments below. Your experiences might offer comfort and strength to someone else going through something similar. Life after Alex and Sarah slowly blossomed. The silence in my new apartment was no longer the heavy quiet of loneliness, but the peaceful stillness of solitude. I filled my days with the things that brought me joy: painting, music, long walks. In the city's vibrant neighborhoods, I reconnected with old friends, forging stronger bonds now that I had the time and emotional energy to nurture those relationships. The house, once a symbol of both sacrifice and heartache, was now undergoing a transformation. I hired a designer who understood my vision, creating a space that was elegant, comfortable, and truly my own. Each carefully chosen piece of furniture, each brushstroke on a new canvas, felt like a step further away from the past and closer to the future I was building. Months passed. I never heard from Alex or Sarah again. Their absence, once a source of pain, now felt like a necessary severing, a cleansing that allowed new growth. I occasionally wondered what had become of them, but the curiosity was fleeting, overshadowed by the contentment I had found in my independence. One sunny afternoon, while having lunch with an old friend, she mentioned seeing Alex working at a local hardware store. The image of my once entitled son struggling to make ends meet flickered in my mind, but it evoked no satisfaction, no sense of vindication, only a quiet acknowledgement of the consequences of his choices. The secret fortune had not been a tool for revenge, but a catalyst for my own liberation. It had allowed me to reclaim my life, to redefine my worth, and to finally live for myself. Sometimes, late at night, when the city lights twinkled like fallen stars outside my window, I would think about Eleanor, her quiet strength, her unwavering kindness, the unexpected gifts she had bestowed upon me. She had seen something in me that even my own son had failed to recognize. Her generosity had not just changed my financial circumstances, it had given me the courage to finally step into my own power. I realized then that the secret fortune was more than just money. It was a symbol of my worth, a tangible representation of the value I had always possessed but had allowed others to diminish. It was a reminder that kindness and generosity can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest acts of love are those we show ourselves. The bitterness I had felt towards Alex and Sarah had slowly faded, replaced by a quiet understanding. Their actions were a reflection of their own shortcomings, their own insecurities. They had tried to diminish me because they felt small themselves. Holding on to anger would only weigh me down, tethering me to the past I was trying to leave behind. I made a conscious decision to let go of the resentment, to forgive them not for their sake, but for my own. Carrying that negativity served no purpose, hindering the peace I was finally starting to cultivate. The focus now was on building a future filled with joy, creativity, and genuine connection. The journey had been painful, but it had ultimately led me to a place of profound self-discovery. I had learned that my worth was not defined by my relationship to others, but by the woman I was within. Life continues to unfold, each day a new opportunity for growth and joy. My paintings are finding an audience, my music fills my home with warmth, and my friendships are a constant source of support. I have built a life that is authentically mine, a testament to the fact that it's never too late to reclaim your happiness. Looking back, I don't regret the years I spent caring for Alex. I loved him deeply, and I believe I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. The pain of his betrayal was a harsh lesson, but one that ultimately led me to a better place. The secret fortune was the catalyst, but the real transformation came from within. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's the importance of recognizing your own value, regardless of how others may treat you. Your story matters, your feelings are valid, and you deserve to be surrounded by love and respect. And so, as I close this chapter, I want to share a final thought. Never let anyone dim your light. Your inner strength is your greatest treasure. If you've resonated with this story, if it sparked something within you, please consider sharing it. Your support helps us bring more stories of resilience and empowerment to light. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of overcoming adversity and finding strength within, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next inspiring tale. Thank you for listening.